If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is an award-winning investigative journalist that I have admired for many years. She's had a stellar career, almost 2 decades of full-time service as the correspondent for 60 Minutes, also the chief foreign correspondent for CBS News. Today, she has a great show going rogue on all platforms. This is must-watch television. I recommend it to you highly. She's also a Christian. She is very smart and has gone into the most important issues of the day. Place I want to start, because I think she and I are both outraged, is by Susan Rice, the former National Security Advisor. She was present in the room in August 2016 when the Russian collusion plot, for which I believe she should be prosecuted, was hatched. She is all over media today, threatening Trump supporters and anyone who doesn't see things her way. Let's listen to Susan Rice.
But when it comes to the elites, the corporate interests, the law firms, the universities, the media, I agree with you, Preet. It is not. It's not going to end well for them. For those that decided that it was, that they would act in their perceived very narrow self-interest, which I would underscore is very short-term self-interest, and take a knee to Trump. I think they're now starting to realize, wait a minute, this is not popular. Trump is not popular. What he is doing, whether on the economy and affordability or on immigration now, is not popular. And that there is likely to be a swing in the other direction, and they are going to be caught with more than their pants down. They're going to be held accountable by those who come in opposition to Trump and win at the ballot box. And I can tell you, Preet, as I talk to leaders in Washington, leaders in our party, leaders in the states, if these corporations think that the Democrats, when they come back in power, are going to, play by the old rules, and say, oh, never mind, we'll forgive you for all the people you've fired, all the policies and principles you've violated, all, the laws you've skirted. I think they've got another thing coming. Because, just like when Trump thought, okay, I'll redistrict and the Democrats won't have the guts to play hardball, they're going to be surprised. Democrats have had a bellyful, and we're not going to play by, the old set of rules when these guys are playing by a very different set of rules. We're going to play by the law, but we're not going to violate the law the way they do. But we're not going to be suckers. And so I think, whether you're a law firm, whether you're a university, whether you're a media entity, whether you're a big corporation, whether you're big tech, you need to play a long game, not this short game that has been so detrimental. There will be an accountability agenda. Companies already are starting to hear.
I think we've got the gist of it. Lara Logan, is that a threat?
Oh, that's most definitely a threat. And I would say there's grounds for investigating that as a terroristic threat, because a terroristic threat is broadly defined as something that terrorizes people. And I would say that, as for anyone that she defines as in opposition to the Democrats, right? She says that anyone who's in opposition to the Democrats, they end up playing the short game, taking a knee to Trump. They need to know that this is not going to end well for them. I mean, that is most certainly a threat.
Yeah, it's really quite extraordinary. And of course, for them to say, well, we're not going to be Mr. Nice Guy when we get in power. I can tell you, General Flynn can tell you, President Donald Trump can tell you, the law doesn't matter. They're the ones who violate the law. They're the ones who launched lawfare. They're the ones who weaponized our Justice Department. And now when anyone talks about accountability and justice in the cases of those who violated the Constitution, and the law in their maniacal effort to get Donald Trump to keep him off the ballot, to put him in jail, to strip him of all of his wealth, and I think at least now, sadly, 3 instances to kill him. They try to convince us that this is about revenge and retaliation, when in fact it's about accountability and justice, and these people don't want to be held accountable. Hillary Clinton this week in a BBC interview saying she has no links to Epstein. Epstein was the Clinton White House 17 times. Her husband was on his plane a few times for his charity work, a few as in 27. No mention of the fact that Jeffrey Epstein provided the seed capital for the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative. No mention of his political contributions to them. No mention of the Clinton Foundation financing the Terra Mar Foundation run by Ghislaine Maxwell, on paper an environmental nonprofit, but in fact a pool of grooming intern potential targets for Jeffrey Epstein. No mention of all of that.
Well, Roger, it's interesting that you brought up Hillary and Susan, because there's a pattern in what they're doing. First of all, they're both on the attack, and they're not the only ones, right? Obama's been doing the same thing. So that tells me, when I look at it sort of, strategically, and I try to analyze it and figure out what's going on here, that tells me that the strategy they've come up with is that attack is the best form of defense. We all know that they're vulnerable right now with the fact that the Trump administration is in power, with so much of the information that's come out. As these documents are being released, not just on the Epstein files, but, if you look at Tulsi Gabbard and what the DNI's office has been investigating, you look at what is being exposed of what they knew and what they said under oath, versus what they said in the public, they're all in trouble. And then there's the case down in Florida that people aren't making a lot of noise about, but it's where Brennan has been subpoenaed, and there's, some dozens of people that have been subpoenaed with him, including the likes of, Comey and co, right? Where he's in serious trouble. He's been trying to get that moved out of the jurisdiction of the judge, Eileen Connor, because she's the one who threw the Trump document case out of court, and they don't feel like they're going to have a good chance with her, because she's been bold enough to rule honestly and not worry about the consequences, unlike some members of the Supreme Court. So what you're describing, though, is a tactic in information warfare that's called projection. And it's when you project onto your enemy or your adversary the exactly what you are guilty of. And we've seen this from the very beginning, because who was cooperating and coordinating and conspiring with foreign governments in order to steal an American election? It was the Democrats and the Hillary campaign and the Obamas and the Brennans and the Comeys and all of these people, right? Stephen Helper, Christopher Steele, these are all foreign spies. And Alistair Downer, the ambassador, former Australian ambassador. These are people who were conspiring. They were running a cell out of Cambridge University. They would host events and conferences which would give cover to American spies. Gina Haspel was head of the CIA in London at the time. She was involved in this. And so these people who literally committed treason are the ones who then accused Trump of being elected because he's working with foreign governments, right? And it's the same thing with
Zelensky.
The Ukraine impeachment trial, same thing,
yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. The Ukrainian impeachment is both a defensive but also an offensive move, because Joe Biden is the one who threatened to withhold $1 billion from Ukrainian President Zelensky unless he fired the prosecutor digging into his son's business dealings at Burisma.
Correct.
So in order to cover that up, the cute twin Vindman brothers, one of them now a congressman, the other one launching a campaign for the U.S. Senate in Florida, where I suspect he'll be confronted with these questions, make up the idea that they overheard a conversation. They tell a third party, Eric Ciamella, a former and future CIA guy, then working for Adam Schiff. He becomes a whistleblower. The whole thing's a fraud. It's a fugazi.
All of it.
Yep, every bit
all of it is a fraud, and they do it over and over and over again. So then, when they weaponize the government against its citizens, not just with January 6th, but with the targeting of parents as domestic terrorists and so on. And what do? They say, okay, we're going to come after you. When Trump says we're going to end the weaponization of the government, they say, oh no, this is retribution, right? He's weaponizing the government against the citizens. They do this over and over again. And the other thing they are doing right now is, in the absence of any kind of reality on their side, there's so much evidence stacked against them at this point, they're just going to create their own reality. Like the Epstein files demonstrate without any shadow of a doubt that the Clintons had a long-term, intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, right? I mean, he didn't have, pictures of any other presidents, paintings of them in his house. So now Hillary's going to go out and she's going to say whatever she wants. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And she did the same thing with the email situation. She went out there saying, I didn't have anything classified on my email. I didn't do anything wrong. She knew that was a lie. Just the fact that she only had one email server was proof that she had broken the law. Because under the law, if you're in the government, you have a classified and an unclassified system, and those are two separate servers. So if she only had one server, just housing those things on one server was a violation of the law. And she knew all of this. She lied about everything, and she got away with it. So that's been an effective tactic for her. Now Susan Rice is doing the same thing. She's saying in there that Trump is more unpopular than ever. That's not true. And she says it's because, of the economy and people don't like what he's doing. No, the only thing Trump supporters do not like right now is that he hasn't held anybody accountable. That's what they don't like, because they all know this isn't about vengeance. This is about people like Susan Rice, who were guilty of treason and sedition in 2016, and they've been doing it ever since, and they're still doing it now, and they're getting away with it. And people are sick to death of that and all the other things that the crimes that have been committed against children, against the American people, and so on. They're sick to death of the fact that there's no accountability. I'm now calling this the no accountability nation.
I hear you. I completely agree. It's an important element, by the way, of the 2026 elections. The people who voted Donald Trump Donald Trump were promised accountability and justice, and we want to see it for him and his family and so many of the victims of the Democrats' lawfare machine. When we come back, I want to ask you about events in Iran because of your experience as a longtime respected foreign correspondent. We're talking to Lara Logan. Don't fail to miss her show, Going Rogue. You can find it on all platforms. That's Lara Logan. We'll be back with her in just a moment. And we're back with veteran investigative journalist Lara Logan. You can follow her on X at Lara Logan. Lara, given your extensive experience as a foreign correspondent, I'd like your views on the current situation in Iran, where the regime seems to be teetering, but no lack of brutality in their tactics to try to stay in power.
Well, Roger, I'll tell you what I said from the very first moment that this began. We've been through this a number of times in our lifetimes, and we've seen what the Iranian regime does. It murders its way out of every uprising. And so this one is no exception, except the scale of it seems to be much worse. Now, it's really frustrating that, there's no foreign media on the ground in Iran. There's reports from the ground from citizen journalists or protesters or, a lot of sympathizers. And it's very difficult to establish exactly what is true. But the regime has at least, conceded at this point that they have a high body count. And there's, they've been sometimes executing hundreds of people in a day. Right. So there's no question that whether you were talking about 20,000, 40,000, or by some accounts more than 90,000 dead, that this is a regime who has no regard for the rights of any of its people. So I find it quite sickening that the Trump administration has got people sitting down to negotiate with them, because for just, as a human being, I feel like while it's difficult to work through the propaganda on both sides, at the same time, how many bodies does it take for people, for governments of the world and nations of the world to stand up and say, we're not talking to these people while they're doing this. I mean, this is an illegitimate regime, And, I'm not falling into the trap of, supporting this one or that one or saying, who should lead Iran. It's obvious at this point that the Iranian regime, not only has it been the number one state sponsor of terrorism worldwide and been responsible for the deaths of countless Muslim people, not just in its own country, but, in places like Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and so on and so on. I mean, not only that, but this regime has proved that it has nefarious intent. And so, I know what is frustrating for me is that it's very easy for people to say Trump is supposed to be the president of peace. And if he's not doing peace and he's doing anything that's not regarded as peace, then he's betraying his base and so on. There's a lot of libertarians who jump on everything and say, oh, no airstrikes, no this, no that, because we believe in peace. Well, how do you think the Second World War was won? It wasn't won in diplomacy, right? It wasn't won on the battlefield of peace. It was won on the battlefield of war and pain and suffering and death and sacrifice. And so it's frustrating because it's another trap that's been created to say if you're a supporter of peace, now you cannot step up anywhere. You cannot be.
And that is, I agree with you. And that's not really the Trump doctrine. What Trump has done here is to view as American power, project America in a very limited way, without committing us to long land wars and American casualties and billions in spending.
Right.
He's projected American power in Iran to try to set back their nuclear weapons development program. Hopefully successfully did so. He used American power in Venezuela in a limited way. That's not what the neocons wanted. That's not what makes Lindsey Graham happy. So Trump has demonstrated he's not afraid to use power, and at a certain point, I do think his patience with the regime in Iran will run out. But the regime uses the potential return of the Shah's son, who's probably is equally as unpopular, and for whom there really is little rapport, as a PR tool, which is really a tragedy. The answer to a theocracy is not another monarchy. Thank you, Lara Logan, Western journalist, someone I admire very much, for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.